Your day isn't complete until you've heard from God. So get ready for the closing word of the day with Sunset Ministries and Pastor Eladio Villanueva. And now, here's Pastor Villanueva with today's closing word.
Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to a brand new week here at Sunset Ministries on this beautiful Monday evening. I want to welcome all of you who are on our conference line live tonight. I want to say a wonderful hello to those of you who are listening to us on Spreaker.com, on your tablet or smartphone or desktop computer. Well, as we close out our series tonight, The Basics of Marriage, that we started last week, tonight we're going to talk about disputes in a marriage and how to diffuse them. Now, if you're a sports fan and you've ever watched a boxing match before, then you know that they try to make the fight as fair as possible. A boxer from one weight class doesn't fight another boxer from another weight class because it would just be total imparity there, right? One would be heavier than the other. It would just be unfair. They have a referee who is there to make sure no one hits below the belt or does anything else that would give them an unfair advantage over the other fighter. And while there are some exceptions, most people watching a boxing match would say that the fight was a fair one, regardless of who ended up the winner. But sadly, it's often not like that in marriage. Often, one spouse is better than the other at debating, at manipulation, or some other technique that seems to give them an advantage over the other one. They might end up winning the fight, but they end up damaging their marriage in the end. So tonight, I want us to take a look at some facts about conflict and then at some ways that we can look at to diffuse conflict in marriage. Because there's nothing worse than going through your marital relationship with unresolved conflict and the pain that comes along with it. So first, before we start, let's take a look at some facts about conflict. First, conflict is normal. I hate to say it, it is normal. It's going to happen. There is no perfect marriage. Let me say that again. There is no perfect marriage. There is bound to be conflict at one point or another in marriage. No matter how good it's going. I've been married 21 years. There has been conflict in our marriage because we are two imperfect human beings. We're different, as we shared the other day. We come into the marriage with many differences. Number two, conflict is an opportunity for growth. We learn from our mistakes. We learn from conflict. We learn how to say sorry. We learn how to forget. We learn how to forgive. We learn how to move on. That's growth. Number three, conflict must be diffused or it will eventually destroy. If we don't learn to deal with that conflict, if we don't learn to diffuse it, it will eventually destroy the relationship. It's like a bomb. Eventually it explodes and it just destroys everything. That is a fact. Finally, number four, conflict demands rules so no one gets hurt. No different like in the boxing match. There are rules to be followed. In conflict, we must set rules and boundaries as well. One of the main rules, and I can't make this any clearer than what I'm about to say, but I need you to understand this fully because I have counseled people before on this, and it is totally unacceptable. One of the lines that can never be crossed in a marriage is that physical line. We must not hit one another. A man must not hit a woman, nor should the woman take advantage and hit the man. That is our boundary, a line we must not cross. There are other rules. We must not beat up on our spouse psychologically. Listen, the tongue can do just as much damage as with a fist. We must, again, have rules in conflict so no one gets hurt. Now let's talk about how to diffuse conflict in your marriage. And tonight I want to use the acronym diffuse, the word diffuse, DIFFUSE. So the first letter in our word diffuse is the letter D, and that stands for defining the problem. Proverbs 15:14 says, the discerning heart seeks knowledge, but the mouth of a fool feeds on folly. We must define the problem. And we're not sure what the problem is, just as Proverbs says we should ask for discernment. We cannot fix a problem until we define what it is. It's the same thing in life. If we take our car into the mechanic, we can come in and the car can make a noise, but the mechanic can't just say, okay, give me new shocks, give me new rotors, give me a new alternator cap. He has to look under the hood. He has to investigate and define the problem first before it can be fixed. It's the same thing in conflict. We must define the problem first before it can be fixed. The next letter is the letter I, and that stands for initiating a time to talk. Matthew 5 verses 23 to 24 says, "Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them, then come and offer your gift." So what God is saying, we have to take a time to talk to one another. Communicate. That's the word. Marriages often fail because of lack of communication. And God is saying, just in this verse here, if there's something going on in your marriage, before you come to the altar to pray, to offer your gifts to the Lord, you have to go be reconciled to your spouse. You need to go take time to talk with them. That's how reconciliation happens. There has to be communication. And I'm not talking about sign language. Because sometimes marriages today are good. The participants in a marriage are good at sign language. You know, one will roll their eyes, the other one will make a face. We have to talk. We have to take time to talk in order to reconcile and take care of a problem. The next letter is the letter F. And that first F is for focusing on the perceived problem. Proverbs 18:19 says, "A brother wronged is more unyielding than a fortified city. Disputes are like the barred gates of a citadel." We have to stay focused on the perceived problem. Sometimes we detract from it. Sometimes we brush it off. Sometimes we go the other way. We have to stay focused on the problem. That's how it gets fixed. You know your spouse is angry? Don't try to brush it off. Stay focused on the problem and deal with it. Don't try to minimize it. Don't try to make it as though it's not a big thing. That's the worst thing we can do. The next one is also the letter F, and it stands for feeling their pain. 1 Peter 3:8 says, "Finally, all of you, be like-minded, be sympathetic, love one another, be compassionate and humble." Listen, we have to be compassionate. Again, I just said we cannot minimize the pain of our spouse. Maybe your spouse is angry. Maybe they're jealous. I mean, listen, there's so many different things. Depressed, feeling threatened, feeling unsure, insecure. We have to be sympathetic, feel their pain. Don't minimize and say, "Oh, you're making a big thing out of nothing. That's such a small thing." Don't do that. God's word is saying to be sympathetic, be compassionate. Sometimes, especially for us men, and again, I can only say it because I'm a man, we lack that compassion. We're rough around the edges. We need to learn to feel their pain and understand what they're going through. The next letter is the letter U, and that stands for uncovering the root problem. Proverbs 20 verse 5 says, "The purpose of a person's heart are deep waters, but one who has insight draws them out." Sometimes the surface stuff is just what that is, surface stuff. A person is acting out, they're angry, but underneath it, there's a root problem. Maybe they're having a difficult time at work. Maybe there's family issues, money issues. It's no different than a child. How many of us are parents and our children act out in school? And the teacher says, well, I want to sit and talk with you because I think there's an underlying problem. And sometimes we find out the child's being abused at home or being bullied in school, whatever it may be. We have to uncover the root problem of the conflict so we can fix it. The next one's the letter S, and that's setting things right between you and your spouse. Romans 12 verses 17 to 18 says, "Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone." We shouldn't go to bed angry with one another. We should do our best to set things right. If our spouse does something wrong with us, we shouldn't repay evil for evil, saying, you know what, I'm going to get even with her. I'm going to get it even with him. He thinks he could do that to me? Well, I'll show him. She thinks she could do that to me? I'll show her. God is saying we need to live at peace with everyone. And listen, I know it's difficult at times. I'm not here to ignorantly saying that, you know what, all marriages are easy. But God in his word is saying, if it is possible, as it depends on you. See, he's saying we have control over that. You can make the difference. Be at peace. Set things right between you and your spouse. The final letter is the letter E. And that's for establishing a specific action plan. Hosea 4:6 says, my people are destroyed. Or some versions say, my people perish from a lack of knowledge. It's the same thing in a marriage. You know, when I'm counseling people, I always tell them, put together a fire drill plan for your marriage. What's that? Well, I'm sure many of you remember when you were in school or at your jobs, you have fire drills. Well, what's the purpose of a fire drill? So when the real thing happens, you know where to respond. You know how to act. You know what needs to be done. It's the same thing in marriages. If you establish a specific action plan, a plan of action, when the fire embers start to smolder, you'll know how to deal with it. Sometimes I tell men, don't respond in the way that you are used to responding. Put that plan together, write out that says the next time this happens, instead of me saying this, I'm going to say that. Or maybe I'm not going to say anything at all. The same thing for the woman. Once we've established that plan, we need to put it into action. We need to practice it. It's like a fire drill. So when the real time comes, when the conflict does arise, you are ready to deal with it. So as we come to a close tonight, the reality is this. There is no perfect marriage. Let me say that again. There is no perfect marriage. Successful marriages are ones where both partners work diligently under the guidance of God's word to make their union a fruitful one. There are differences that we bring into the marriage, as we learned the other day. We also learned that we are purposely made different. But in the hands of God, those differences can become strengths. And my prayer is that those who are married, those who are listening to the sound of my voice, or who are married, those on the line tonight who are married and are going through struggles, or maybe you've already gone through some struggles, that you'll see that despite the differences, the conflicts that you may have, God can make things right. But you got to give it to God. Marriage is a beautiful thing that has been instituted by God. A union between a man and a woman to be enjoyed fully. And the two questions that I leave you tonight are this. First, for those of you who are married, will you give God your marriage tonight? Maybe your marriage is broken. Maybe it's falling apart. Maybe it's not as shiny as it once was. But placing it in the hands of the potter, he can make it new again. How many of you remember a potter taking that lump of clay and spinning it on that wheel and making a beautiful creation? That's what God can do with a broken marriage. But you have to give it to him. You got to put it in the hands of the potter so he can fix the broken pieces. The next question is for those who may be thinking about getting married. Will you give God your marriage plans? You see, many today, even though they espouse to be Christians, they set their marriage plans based on the ways of the world. Their plans are, we're going to have X amount of kids. We're going to have this job, drive 2 cars, live in a big house, live here, live there. My brothers and sisters, we need to wake up. We need to give God our marriage plans. What if it's God's plan that you don't live in a big house? What if it's God's plan that you don't have children or drive 2 cars or live in that place you thought you were going to live, that town you thought you were going to live in? I guarantee you this. You give your plans to God, your wedding will get off on the best start it could ever get off on. And if you follow God's plan, Your marriage will be more fruitful than you could have ever expected. Listen, I've been married more than 21 years. My marriage is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but we've made it through because we've given our marriage to God. My brothers and sisters, no matter what condition, what state your marriage is right now, in the hands of the potter, things are made whole again as we come to a close in prayer.
You've been listening to Pastor Eladio Villanueva on Sunset Ministries. Tune in to our live broadcast every Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 9 p.m. on Spreaker.com. For more information, visit our website at sunsetministries.org.